Hello, I'm Mr. Fish. Didn't know you were there. Hey there, Rednecks, Preppies, Redneck Preppies. It's me, the Redneck Preppy. How you doing today? Great, good. I was in the shower the other day thinking, where of course most people do their finest thinking, and the question occurred to me. If I was limited to just one lure for the rest of my life that I had to use to catch bass, both small and largemouth, what would it be? Well, those who know me, or at least have watched enough videos on this channel over the years, would probably guess that top water lures would be my favorite. And they would be right. If you give me a choice of any lures that would be effective in a given situation, and one of those lures is topwater, yoink, I'm choosing that one every time. But topwater lures aren't effective in every situation. Nothing's going to ruin topwater action faster than choppy water or particularly sunny days. Cold water doesn't generally cause aggressive fish, so topwater is not the best choice in that scenario either. And obviously fish down deep might not be interested in coming up to the surface to grab your lure. So that got me to thinking, what would actually be a good all-round lure? Perhaps not the best choice in every scenario, but good enough that you could catch in a variety of water depths, cover, watercolor, and with varied techniques. And my answer is simple. The humble plastic worm, or in this case, stick bait if you prefer. Now, for those of you in doubt, and I'm sure there'll be some, allow me to explain. Let's first deal with water depths. Now, standard approach with plastic worms is to fish them in deeper water thanks to some of the most popular techniques in use. But I'll go to my grave fighting what I feel is a misconception that worms are best used in deep water. I would argue that you can fish a plastic worm in shallower water just as easily and effectively as you can in deep water. You can use techniques like Carolina rigs or wacky rigging just fine in shallow water. And if you want to go deep, those two are just as applicable along with techniques like drop shotting. And you can fish drop shotting shallow too, by the way. Deep, shallow, or anything in between, there are rigs, techniques, and worms that'll work for you. Now, as for cover, you want to go through a heavy cover like weeds? You already know about Texas rigging worms. But it doesn't matter because you can fish that worm grazing the top of gnarly cover like rocks, timber, or vegetation, depending on which technique you decide to employ. You got boat docks, you can pitch them. You on a river? Carolina rig those worms and drag it on the bottom, or Texas rig them and throw them along weedy banks. Watercolor? My friend, worms come in every damned color known to mankind with the dumbest made-up names like chicken with black flecks or sunburst brown. Now, although I'm on record as being somewhat dubious about the extremes that some people go to when utilizing color, it's indisputable that certain colors work in certain situations. You want to fish worms in less than clear water or at night, using black or Junebug colored worms is an option. And if you're in clear water, employing greens and browns is probably the best. Now, this isn't a seminar in color choice. I'm merely illustrating that relying on worms doesn't mean limiting what kind of water that you can fish. And techniques? Lord love a duck. I could sit here all day talking about the various techniques that you can use. We've already mentioned Carolina and Texas rigs, wacky rigs, drop shotting, there's Bubba shotting, you can have shaky heads, Nico rigs, Florida rigs, you can even go topwater with a weightless floating worm. I still got two here, but I'll bet you I could think of two more if you gave me time. And before you think that using worms is just a finesse lure a la drop shotting, you can use a Carolina rigged worm as a search bait. Traditionally, what you would use things like spinner baits for, by merely skipping that rig across the bottom. And if it's a variety that you're looking for, there is a smorgasbord out there. Your standard stick baits usually range from like 4 to 7 inches in length, but you also got curly tail, paddle tail, ribbon tail, straight tails. You got thick and thin worms. And every color known to man. I'm still left with 2. And to fish worms effectively, all you need are the appropriate hooks, lines, and weights. Of course, there are lures and techniques that worms aren't gonna be able to replicate. If you want like a noisy lure, you're gonna have to look elsewhere. If you like to keep that boat moving, fishing worms and stick baits can be a bit challenging. You can't use a worm as if it were a buzz bait or a spinner bait. Well, not usually. It's not a jerk bait or a slash bait. Believe me, I tried that once. No walking the dog. Yeah, I could keep going on. Plenty of lures that a worm simply isn't a replacement for. This isn't exactly a secret lure reveal video. I mean, worms have been one of the earliest plastic lures to be introduced, and there isn't a professional bass angler who wouldn't use them in a tournament if they thought that they could catch fish with them. Heck, the late Aaron Martens ate well after the 2012 Bassmaster Classic, basically only throwing a 6-inch straight tail robo worm on a drop shot rig in as little as 2 feet of water. And I will remind you that this was on the Red River in Louisiana, water traditionally fished with power techniques and lures. Despite that, there are a lot of people absolutely handcuffed to the idea that worms are a purely finesse bait that you should only be using in certain situations. And while they may not be a one-size-fits-all solution, I think I've broadly argued and shown today that you can use them in many different ways. Is the humble plastic worm the most versatile lure in your tackle box? I think so. We've probably forgotten more ways on how to fish them than most of us could rhyme off the many ways that we can fish them today. So don't limit yourself to the traditional notions of when and how to use a worm. There's honestly more to life than just wacky rigging a Senko and calling it a day. At any rate, I hope you found today's video to at least be vaguely entertaining and mildly informative. As always, I hope, regardless of what lure you use, that your live well is always filled. Take care, and bye-bye.